I suppose I brought it upon myself. See, I was always that friend that would go out of their way to tell you that they weren't afraid of anything. Whenever we went to see a scary movie, I would sit like a rock in my seat. That wasn't all that scary. I really saw my friends. I would walk through the parking lot and they would just look at me and scoff. Every Halloween we'd go to that haunted house attraction and I always had to be that asshole that gives the people just doing their job some lip. It's not a personality trait that I'm particularly proud of. But rest assured, I got it straightened out with a little help from my friends. You see, I'd been thrown for a loop when the factory I was working for ended up going under just in a couple of weeks, and management kept it tight-lipped. So one week I was employed, the next I was looking through papers trying to find someone new. As annoying as I could be sometimes, I still had friends who would help me out when I needed it. So it didn't come as a huge surprise when one of them called me up and told me that they had found a job that was perfect for me. It was a position for a night guard at some checkpoint outside of an office building. It was a pretty far drive, and the site was fairly isolated from any other building, but I needed a job as soon as I could find one, so I agreed to give it a go. Now, little did I know, it was a front. I'm sure most of you heard of the show, and if you haven't, don't worry, it hasn't been relevant for quite some time. For those of you who don't know, the show was, in concept, a prank show. They'd bring the victim into various situations, but most typically, it would be a new job. They would make the job sketchy, and they try to scare the victim with some monster or a crazy person, stuff like that. Had a couple of seasons, died off, then came back for a handful of seasons, and my episode was to air in the first batch of seasons. Before you go thinking my buddy was being cruel by making me think that I'd found a job when I didn't, he did have work lined up for me, but decided it would be worth it to mess with the big brave boy first. My shift would start at night, long after the sun had gone down. I watched the beams from my headlights cast over the small booth as I pulled into the dirt path. I was immediately stopped by a rather large and intimidating fella stepping out of the booth. He asked me my name and why I was there, to which I replied that I was the new guy. He chuckled and he went back into the booth. I watched him pick up a walkie-talkie and mumble into it. Walking back out, he asked me to leave the car, explaining that we weren't supposed to go back there, and that someone would come to park my car for me. I looked up at the back there that he was talking about. It just looked like a normal office building, maybe 6 or 7 stories high. Sure enough, after a few moments, someone showed up, seemingly from nowhere, took my keys from me. I was a little uneasy about it, but I needed the job, so I didn't make a fuss about it and just hoped for the best. Then the man guided me into the booth as the other one drove away with my car towards the building. I was shown everything I needed to know about the job and what exactly I was supposed to be doing. All I had to do was keep an eye on who exited and entered the path, make sure all license plates and ID cards matched up with what we had on file, and radio the office if there was any issues or discrepancies. It seemed like a relatively easy job, and the pay was good, so I wondered why they might have needed someone on such short notice. Then it was explained to me, and I discovered why my friend said it was a job that would be perfect for me. The man told me that not many cars come and go through the overnight shift, so it can get pretty lonely. Lonely and quiet. Sitting in the booth all night surrounded by mostly darkness and dirt would make some people a little stir-crazy. People would quit the job reporting they had heard noises in the distance or saw some humanoid shape walking around unaccounted for. Well, because I always said that I wasn't afraid of anything. My friend probably thought that my arrogance would hide how sketchy and weird the whole situation was, and, well, he was right. I laughed at the notion of being afraid of the dark, and the man smiled at me before telling me the most important part of the job was just to keep my wits about me. After another few minutes of casual conversation, he told me that his shift was over and that I would be on my own, repeating to call the office if I needed anything. Then it was just me, sitting in that booth. It was isolating, for sure, and when I saw that my phone had no service, I readied myself for one very long night. At least an hour had passed without any activity to speak of. Not a single car coming in or going out. It wasn't getting to me, but I could see why someone might get a little antsy sitting out there. It was just a little too cold to really settle in. And then I heard the first, let's say, oddity. They couldn't have been quieter out there, and I could have heard someone breathing from a mile away. Instead, I heard a low hum that sounded like an old fridge kicking in. I looked around the darkness as the noise continued for a few seconds before disappearing again. With a heavy breath, I tried to calm myself, speaking aloud that it was just some animal. It wasn't long after that I heard the distinct sound of footsteps against the dirt. It sounded so close, but no matter where I looked, I couldn't find the source of the noise. It sounded too loud to be caused by some small animal. And that's when I saw it in the distance. A tall and looming figure that was enveloped by shadows. The thing was just standing there, facing the booth. I could still hear footsteps, though. I heard a faint whine ring out, and an alarm, and when I looked behind me, I saw that the building had red lights pulsing all around it. It was my first night there, but I didn't need to be a genius to know that something was wrong. I picked up the walkie-talkie and tried to communicate that someone was on the premises. And when I looked back up, the figure was gone. Just the expanse of darkness was before me, and just below the distant alarm. I could hear the hum again, much closer this time. Turning my head slowly, I was met with the same figure inches away from the glass. Its skin was pulled tight and seemed to have rips and tears, revealing a fleshy interior. My heart raced, and immediately I fell backwards, opening the door to the booth behind me. I'll admit, I was moments from wetting my pants. As I ran away from the booth, I heard a voice calling after me. I turned to see the man who had taught me how to do the job. He was running after me, waving his arms all around. I stopped to let him catch up to me, curious about what he was even doing here. "What happened?" he asked me, nearly running out of breath. I explained to him the things that I heard and the creature that I came face to face with. "Are you scared?" he asked me in an almost mocking tone. "Yeah, of course I'm scared," I replied, with a little more gusto than I intended. "Well, you shouldn't be." He took a deep breath and straightened his back. "Because you're on scare tactics," he exclaimed, loud enough for his voice to echo through the vastness around us. And just then a black van pulled up behind me and a small crew filed out, most notably a cameraman and a boom mic operator. The beast I had seen slowly walked into the frame as I tried to come to terms with the nonsense around me. I watched as the thing pulled its mask off to reveal just a normal-looking guy underneath it, bearing a wide smile. "Your friend set you up," the man explained, pointing towards the darkness. We all stood quietly like we were waiting for something. I got worried when the crew started giving cautious looks to each other. I heard the cameraman mutter about where the rest of the crew was, but there was no answer. The guy playing the creature looked back at the office building, still pulsing with red lights. "The hell's going on over there?" he questioned the rest of the crew, but again there was no answer, and I was getting the feeling everyone was becoming just as confused as me. I started to grow concerned for my friend. I had seen the show before. He was supposed to come out and he was supposed to laugh at me, but there was nothing but silence. Again, from seemingly nowhere, someone approached from the direction of the office building. He was screaming as he ran towards us, and before we got close enough, he dropped to the dirt and stopped moving. What is this?" I asked, growing furious. "This isn't us," the camera operator replied. His voice was shaky and sincere, and it was enough to drop my heart. From the direction of the building was another approaching figure. This one walked calmly with heavy footsteps. The closer it got to the van, the more the van's headlights revealed about the lumbering figure. Comically white skin stained red. Spurts of blood were pouring out where the figure's left arm would have been like it was torn off. It walked like it was uncertain of how to hold itself up, like a newborn doe. It was at least a foot taller than any of us there. Its right arm hung low and dragged a hand across the dirt, one that ended in gleaming and sharp claws. The man who was dressed as the creature for the show started to speak the moment he created a noise. The thing lunged forward and it pounced on him. His screams were muffled as the creature tore away at his body, red splashes spilling into red dirt. It looked like the ground was rusted as it soaked the crimson in. None of us were able to move, stunned by the sight of the thing rubbing its head against the now motionless man. Its head was easily the most unsettling part. It was the shape of a human's, but it was like someone had dragged a knife from top to bottom all around it, like its head was made out of rows of gills, slit flesh that squirmed, creating openings that tore away at the man that it had mounted, strips of flesh hanging out of small gaps. I remember the man screaming and thought that must have been what lured it towards us, and how it pounced the actor when he made noise. Carefully, I bent over and I grabbed the rock that was by my feet. Trying to make as little noise as possible, I tossed the rock, and when it pinged against the ground, I watched as the creature's gills flared and widened the openings. I could see the shining red, viscous membrane behind the gills, and the small rows of sharp teeth that lined them. If we tried to make it to the van, that thing would no doubt rip us to shreds. But when I turned towards the boom mic operator, an idea formed. The thing was as still as a rock, with its gills still flared open, waiting for a noise to attack. All I had to do was move quieter than the distant alarms, and slowly I shuffled over to the boom mic and stared into his eyes, trying to convey that I had a plan. I don't know how I was even able to orchestrate my body at all. The only explanation I had is that an unreal amount of adrenaline must have been coursing through my body, and slowly I reached forward and pulled the headphones off the guy's head. I pointed at the boom mic, and then at the wheel of the van, and then the front of the van. The camera and the mic operator took a moment to get what I was going for, but they soon nodded in understanding. I hope to God they understood the plan and that it would even work if they did. As I stepped towards the creature that now had a small, scarlet pool around it, looking like the most gruesome moat I've ever seen. Looking behind me, I saw the other two guys get into position, and the actor who taught me how to do the job also slowly moving towards the van. The creature, no longer hearing a threat, allowed the open spaces in its head to close again. Hoping it wouldn't be able to feel it, and that hearing was its only sense, I gently dropped the headphones onto its head. My hands were so shaky that I was worried I'd become the next victim the moment the headphones touched it. But still, it remained unmoving. Thankfully, the sound of its own blood from its missing arm dripping into the pool of the other actor's gore was enough to mask my noises. Once the headphones were on, I started to back away, but looking at the closed gills, I didn't think the plan would work unless they were opened. I lifted my arm and I held up 3 fingers, then 2, then 1. Before putting the last finger down, I began to shout. It all happened so quickly. As soon as my voice left me, the thing's head started to open up again. Right as the creature rose towards me, the sound of the van's horn started to blare behind me. I turned away from the creature and started running towards the van, and when the cameraman's hand still firmly pressing the horn down and the boom mic operator dropping it in front of the van to continue amplifying the noise, we all started to pile in, swinging the door shut. I watched the thing drop to its knees, clawing desperately at its head but missing the headphones over and over. It ripped and tore at the flesh covering its head, dropping thin trails of blood to paint its white exterior. The van quickly backed up and continued to do so until we could no longer see the writhing creature. No one said a word as we drove down the highway. Part of me kept hoping that someone would say that was a prank too, but that was naive. When they dropped me off, I was told to expect a call, and the next day I got one. It was from the producers, and I ended up in a meeting with them. One where they went over the details with me. One where a very well-dressed man sat quietly. I remember the logo on his badge. It was the same one on the building from that night. The man and the producers offered me a lot of money to keep my mouth shut about what happened, along with returning my car. I didn't think anyone would believe me if I spoke out anyway, so I took the offer. I'm only talking about it now because it's the anniversary of when my friend and whatever crew he was in went missing. The episode never made it to the air, and the footage of it is something that I'm sure was burned and buried a long time ago. I don't know that this show ended this season my episode was meant to appear in. At least until it picked up again sometime later. I'm much easier to scare nowadays. You know, just knowing things like that creature exist out there. Just remembering how infantile its behavior was. Like it hadn't even reached maturity yet. And I'm thinking of what a mature version of that thing might never cease to make me shiver. I can't imagine what's going on in the walls of that building. And I hope the world never has to find out. Hey there kids, it's me, Mr. Creepypasta, and I just wanted to tell you thank you so much for watching tonight's video. And if you are interested in getting a nice, warm beverage while listening to Mr. Creepypasta's Storytime, you can always check out my wife's tea shop. It's etsy.com/shop/ivory-monocle-tea. The Ivory Monocle Tea Shop has different kinds of teas, from Dungeons and Dragons to anime to Final Fantasy to creepypastas. You can actually get a creepypasta tea set that features a Mr. Creepypasta tea. It's the tea that I generally have here at my desk as I'm recording. And you can actually request after you order one to get the special dabbing MCP sticker, which is the one that I use. And a very special thank you to everybody on that Patreon, patreon.com/MrCreepypasta, especially Ariel Torres, Jordan Alexander Sanchez, Ken Lando Higuchi, Brianna Van Tine-Janzen, Chompski, TheRedOakShieldVirus, Sindee Barney, Asia, G Weevil 3, Diana Kraus, Stephen VanHuss, Tristain Pelton, Nico, kaeo, TheGingerBroz, Dante Rowe, Raphael Rodriguez, Don Meulmeester, Eliminator 86, SteampunkSinner, Kaleb Dougal, Sky Harbor, The Homeless Bird 93, Gabrielle Undefined, Bobby Carmen, Liam Newman, Aaron Stormcrow, Bobby Jean Torgan, Dr. Strawberry, The Wormhole, Barbara Macedo, and Vic. Thank you guys so much, and if anyone would like to join them on that list, head over to patreon.com/MrCreepypasta. Here's hoping that you guys are loving the horror as much as I am. And sweet dreams.